Hello, the Divine Code reading for October 7th, pages 243 and 244. We are in the chapter, Practices that are Forbidden as Customs of Idol Worshippers. Topic number 3, Soothsaying involves those who follow signs such as, since my bread has fallen from my mouth, or my stick has fallen from my hand, etc. I will not go to such and such a place today, or if I go, I will not be successful. Or, since a fox passed me on the right-hand side, I will not leave my house today, if I do, I will meet a swindler, and so forth. This also applies to those who listen to the chirpings of birds and follow signs such as, because the birds chirped this way or that way, such and such a thing will happen and such and such a will not, or because the birds chirped today will be today it will be good to do this, but bad to do that, and so forth. Those who base their actions on the actions of a rat or birds or signs in the heavens, we see in Jeremiah 10, chapter 10, verse 2, are also practicing soothsaying. Similarly, one who designates signs for himself by deciding he will act in this way or that way according to what transpires before his eyes is also soothsaying. Likewise, one who tells a person that he will have bad luck unless he slaughters his rooster that called out in the evening, or his hen that made a sound like a rooster, is also soothsaying. All of these practices are forbidden. See the Rambam in the Laws of the Worship of Stars and Idols, chapter 11, Code Oct, Yoredea 179. The practice of soothsaying also includes those who throw dice or coins or draw cards, or do anything else that produces one result or another with a statistical probability, and follow these as signs, such as, if it will fall a certain way, this is a sign for such and such, and if it will fall otherwise, it is a different sign. See Sefer Mitzvot Gadol, quoted in Beit Yosef, Yoredea, chapter 179. Though he explains that this is included in the prohibition of a diviner, it is clear that Rambam's opinion includes enchantment. So we're looking at different examples. What it is when a person, in idolatry, they have all sorts of things that are associated with that idol. Idolatry is kind of a science. And within the system of an idol, of a worship of an idol, there's all sorts of activities that are connected with that idol. Like somehow connected with the idol is the idea that if a rooster crows in the evening, it should be slaughtered or something like that. It makes sense within the idol worship. Now, someone that takes on these customs, within the context of the idolatry, the custom actually makes sense. And this is one of the confusing parts of it. Outside of the idolatry, the custom is just basically it's a superstition. The superstitions that kind of are these ancient superstitions that society remembers go back to some kind of idol worship. They go back to some kind of a science of the universe that made sense, and it actually functioned within that context. We're not supposed to. We do not want to live within the context of the idol worship, and therefore these things don't make any sense. But people still follow it because it just seems to make sense somehow deep within their psyche and their their collective consciousness or whatever of some ancient thing that was being done. It made sense, and therefore they don't want to step on a crack, break somebody's back. Idea is something that made sense at some point within the context of idol worship. We're not to follow these practices. We're to identify and realize that they're not something we're supposed to follow. And we don't make decisions based upon flipping of coins or the way birds chirping don't really tell us anything, assuming they don't tell us anything. People just think, oh, if a bird chirps a certain way, it means something, and I should base my actions on what the bird does. These are prohibited acts, prohibited superstition or soothsaying. Topic number 4. The prohibition of soothsaying applies when one sets a sign for himself and acts accordingly, and there is no natural or logical connection between the sign and the action he chooses because of it, or the course of non-action that he chooses, and it emerges that he believes in folly. So this is where there's no logical connection. There's no logical connection that the person that is basing his action on these various signs, there's no logical, he cannot explain, and nobody he can rely upon can explain why he would do it. He just does it because it's a custom. It's a custom that goes back to some idolatrous activity, and there's this vague social memory of it. In contrast, one who sets a sign for himself based on logical reasoning, as Eleazar, the righteous servant of Abraham, did. In Genesis chapter 24, 12 and 14. By saying, let it be that a maiden who replies, drink, and I will give you water for your camels, and acts with kindness. That's in brackets, and acts with kindness. Her will you, God, have designated for your servant, for Isaac. So in the case of the Abraham's servant looking for a wife for Isaac, he picked out a logical clue. If somebody does this, it means that the person is acting out kindness, and that would be a proper sign. It's a logical sign that that's a person that would be good. It wasn't saying, well, if the person has a yellow bow in her hair or something like that, that would not be logical, or unless they could explain it as logical. But he came up with something that made sense. Likewise, a person looking for a certain natural occurrence from which he can logically deduce that the natural consequence will be such and such, and he decides to act accordingly and not to take action, this is not considered soothsaying. Ron is quoted in Keshev Mishnah, he'll quote Avot Kohein 11:4, Nemukai Yosef, Tractate Sanhedrin, into chapter 7, Re'aim in Hagot Mamonet, responsa of Rashba, chapter 8:25. So in cases where there's a logical connection, if somehow the person learns logically a bird's chirp a certain way, a storm is coming, therefore he should not plant his field that day, that would be a logical thing. He's not using it based upon something he can't explain. That's the major thing. If a person can explain it and understand it, then it makes sense. Then it's okay. But if the person cannot explain it, then where is he getting the idea from? What is he relying upon is an old custom. And those old customs were typically connected with idolatry. And therefore, they would be prohibited. If you can't understand it, and if it's not understood as a logical thing, and somebody he knows, some professor he knows that knows how to understand the chirping of birds based on nature and logic, he could rely upon that, but not upon the customs of an idol worshiper. It is permitted to make statements such as, topic number 5. It is permitted to make statements such as, this house that I built is a good sign for me. Or, this spouse that I married is a blessing, for once we married, I became rich. Or, the animal that I bought is blessed, for once I purchased it, I became rich. And the like. These statements are not forbidden because by making them, one is not decided upon a course of action or refrained from doing something based on a sign. Rather, one is accepted that whatever is good, it is as a good sign for what has already happened. Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, Rambam, the laws of worship of stars and idols, chapter 11, and Shulchan Aruch, Yerdea, chapter 179. However, it is forbidden by the prohibition of soothsaying for one to designate a sign for himself upon which he will decide upon a future action to do this or not to do that, depending on how the sign turns out. This is implied in Keshlach Mishnah, Hilkot Avot Kohanim, 11:5. So if the person notices afterwards that something was good for his life, maybe that bird chirping did foretell something, but he doesn't base his actions upon the bird chirping, it's more retrospectively seeing it, then that's permitted. But if he then says, okay, because of that, I'm going to do something in the future differently, he can't do that based upon something unless there's a logical connection to the action he wants to make. Otherwise, he's mimicking he's putting his trust in some action that doesn't make logical sense, and that would be considered idolatrous. Thank you.